Welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I am thrilled to have with me Anthony Banome. Anthony is the
How are you,
Director
sir?
of Sales with Fontainebleau Aviation down in Apalaca, Miami, Florida. So he's got a great 15-year career in FBO and aircraft, basically in the aviation and FBO business. And we met back at Corporate Jet Investor a while back, and thrilled to have him on. Anthony, how you doing today?
Excellent. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for, again, your service. It's an exciting opportunity.
No, it's great. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate you taking some time out of the holiday to do it. It's January 2nd. Happy 2020. But
Thank you. Yeah.
hey, so your background is pretty interesting. You started out as a math teacher in New York, and then you entered
Yes, sir.
this crazy world of FBO management and FBO sales. How'd you make that transition?
Well, I'm definitely New York roots, and when you have New York roots, it seems like a lot of the career paths are either, electrician, union, fire department, police department, teacher. So, my whole family is either teachers or tradesmen. My brother is actually a FDNY fireman in Brooklyn. So as I was looking for a job in hospitality, I actually was teaching. That turned into a full-time gig while I was working at Teterboro on the weekends. And then at some point after teaching for a couple of years, which I did enjoy, it turns out when you don't think you're going to enjoy something and you're just, doing it because you were kind of, fell into that route, it ended up being pretty enjoyable to teach the kids. It was math that I was teaching them. And then at some point I did have to transition, make a decision. And that's when I went to Teterboro full-time, thinking I could always go back to teaching if I wanted to. And here I am 15 years later, working at an FBO in Miami nonetheless, which I never even thought I would leave Brooklyn or Staten Island. And I'm 1,000 miles south, which is pretty cool.
There you
Definitely
go.
pretty cool.
So Fountainbleau's got a nice little name for itself down in Miami. Obviously a very high-end independent. Yeah. What's happening? We were talking a little bit offline. What are you seeing amongst your customers now? How's the market changing a little bit amongst the, you've got what, 75 airplanes in your hangar now.
Yep,
how are you seeing your customers changing?
We're definitely seeing, Miami has an interesting blend of, it's kind of the safe house for, it seems like a lot of overflow because South Florida has always been people's second home. And I think technology has played a large part, and people realize they can spend a lot of time at their second home or maybe even create it their main home. So what has once been a spot that people liked to travel to now has become their main spot. And that's a combination of South America, certainly the Northeast, all of New York and the Boston area, DC area, Pennsylvania area. And then, of course, a little bit of Europe. We have people, probably 10% of our business is coming in from Europe. So it's kind of this mecca of Northeast, South America, Europe that has really created a nice identity for itself. And recently, it hasn't hurt that in New York, obviously, the taxes aren't as advantageous as they would be in South Florida. So we see a lot of full operations just transitioning to South Florida. But it has allowed the Miami market to continue to mature at a pretty rapid rate. So it's exciting to be a part of that because they expect a certain level of service. I always say that we're not comparing ourselves to other South Florida operations. We want to be the best. And if people are coming from all over the world and now calling Miami their home, you want to be the best to what they've seen, not just in South Florida, but anywhere. So we hold the bar pretty high. Fountainbleu development with the other properties, JW Marriott, Fountainbleu South Beach, they all have an extremely high standard. So we're just falling in line with what the company has done outside of aviation.
So amongst the demographic, I mean, everybody's talking now about the demographic of the business jet user starting to get a little bit younger. Tech companies, maybe a little bit of younger CEOs coming on. Are you seeing a big change in the expectations amongst your customers at all?
I would say that's very accurate. It's been pretty incredible. In my time in Teterboro, I had the pleasure of seeing people grow from citations to challengers to globals over the course of 10 years, grow with the same crew, hire more crew members. And in my past 3 years here, not specific necessarily to Miami, but just kind of what's going on out there in the industry, we've seen people, younger people say, this is my first aircraft. I'm looking for a hangar. Okay, what type of aircraft is it? It's going to be a Gulfstream 650. I'm like, okay, all right. This is your first aircraft. How old are you? 38. Okay. You know, and it's usually tech-based or, you know, somebody who had built up a company that gained traction extremely fast or, you know, a variety of different reasons. But it seems like, you know, the big ticket items or the wealth can happen quicker with the younger generation. So we still see the growth. We still see people going from Challengers to Global 5000 and 6000 and G280s going to G650s. But there's definitely been this market of first-time users jumping right into pretty big aircraft, and not because it's over their head, just because that's how it happens for them. So pretty incredible.
So you as an FBO, so, you know, you've got, how do you and your FBO staff adjust to that? I mean, are the expectations of a younger owner different than, you know, one who's more mature? Have you seen a change there, or is it, you know, high-end service across the board? I mean, are you seeing some changes in technology that these guys expect from you? What's the challenge in dealing with the new demographic?
Well, I'll definitely say this. It's a good and a bad thing. I'll knock aviation in general by saying it seems like aviation is always lagging a little bit with what's out there from a communication and technology standpoint outside of the actual machines that we fly. So from responsiveness, and, you know, you think of things like Uber, and people are always trying to come up with the next aviation app-based Uber piece of technology. Younger owners typically are pretty savvy with communication and response times on certain things. So even though there's an education standpoint that maybe you may think is elementary for people who have been in aviation for the past 20 years and grew through the system, they seem pretty responsive. Nothing intimidates them. So you might be starting out like, how does this guy not know this already? But in such a short time of dialogue over a couple months, you seem like you're talking about things that are pretty well advanced because they exist outside of aviation already. They've seen it outside of aviation already, and they usually don't want to think that it doesn't or can't exist within the realm of aviation. So you just got to be prepared, be on your toes, you know, and actually be open to what they're looking for. It seems like they allow less of a buffer sometimes. In the past, owners had many more middlemen involved, and now it seems like the newer generation aren't afraid to communicate directly with who is offering them what, because that's how they got to where they're at. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic, but you know, responsiveness is always going to be the key. You know, everybody who uses Uber and who uses these things grew up in a world of you can get whatever you need in less than 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So as long as you stay in line with those types of expectations, you should be okay.
Yeah, I got you. Now of the airplanes in your hangar, you know, 91, they're all in a 91, some are on a 135 ticket.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying that, you know, a lot of them, hey, the days of someone wanting 200-300 hours of charter on their airplane is starting to go away. What's the expectation amongst people in their airplanes now?
I would say definitely the need or the desire to use their aircraft for 135 to offset cost has gone away, but it's kind of for a positive reason, because of the examples that pop into my head. It seems like they're not using their aircraft to do charter, but they're using their aircraft to grow their own business. And the utilization of the aircraft has not gone down, just that if somebody was going to use the aircraft 500 hours and in the past it was 250 and 250 for charter, it seems like they're using it 475 out of the 500 hours for their own business, to grow their own business. And that has had exponential growth and revenue for their own business, which to me is how it should be. You know, it's a beautiful thing to see people grow and actually say, you know, in a year or so, we're going to need another aircraft because we're flying more and going more places and the company's growing more. It's like, okay, that's what it's used for. This is a business tool. So from our standpoint, we like when the planes fly regardless. We don't get too much into the charter 135/91 aspect of it. We just like to see the asset being utilized, and there's no shortage right now of the assets being utilized. Just how they're being utilized seems to be the difference.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So so the guys that are flying their airplanes now and they're growing their business, and you always see there's always the debate, cost effective, waste of money, somewhere in between. What's the message that these guys are telling you privately or offline about the value of the airplane?
It would just be impossible to do what they're doing. I think even more so now than in the past. Certainly, people know that you can hit multiple cities and get to multiple meetings if you have the right tool. And everybody seems to be a little bit more conscious as to getting the mission sensitive aircraft for their needs. But it would be no fabrication to say that their business would not be where it is if they didn't have the aviation tool that they have at their disposal. And I'm a family guy as well. Their family relationships wouldn't be where it would be if they didn't have the tool as well. So it's certainly a business tool, but if you made all of your meetings, being able to get back home to your family that same night certainly weighs into it, even though that didn't close the deal that closed, that kept your family relationship and your family bond healthy. And that long-term, makes your business continue to grow as well. So, family and business. And I just feel like people are using them more the right way these days, and even more efficient than they were 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I've run into a lot of people, recently, they're flying stuff everywhere from an older CJ2 or a Bravo. I ran into a guy not too long ago with a CJ4, a little bit bigger. And then, I've known a lot of people 650s, 550s, 650s. And they're like, we couldn't do what we do, without it. One guy was based up in North Dakota and he runs a fuel business out of North Dakota. He's like, I couldn't do it, and, there's always so much in the press. The first thing to go is the jet. I really wish the first thing to get criticized is the company jet. And I really wish that somebody would take an objective look in the press and say, look, these things really are tools.
Absolutely. I mean, they're absolutely tools, and, they've become more dynamic. Obviously, every aircraft you can think of, certainly the ones that charter, but anybody who's got a functional asset that's running their business, it seems like they have Wi-Fi on the aircraft or some type of connectivity. So it doesn't end. It used to be, okay, when you were on the plane, kind of time stopped from your communication standpoint, but now we're just free flowing with information. Nothing stops. Everything continues to go even while you're going. So exponentially, the productivity is through the roof.
What's the biggest challenge you guys have down there as an FBO? What's the biggest challenge from your company standpoint in Miami?
Not so much Miami, but since we're on the sake of how efficient the aircraft are, an interesting piece, me being the fuel guy and always looking at the fuel numbers, is you used to compete with the FBOs on your field for fuel volume. That was a common thing. It still is, who you are competing for market share with, but with 550s and 6000s and Gulfstream 650s, I mean, they could take fuel in Shannon, Ireland and bring it back to Miami, not need fuel in Miami, fly to San Francisco. I mean, these are common things now where you're like, wait a minute, where's the fuel on that plane? It stayed 3 days and it's a giant plane. We were expecting something tremendous. And you realize you're competing with all of the other stops of the aircraft rather than just what's in Miami or South Florida. So from that standpoint, the world they would say the world shrinks. Well, it definitely shrinks from a competition standpoint, because now you need to be their best service and price option with probably half a dozen spots in their route in that week. So it's interesting. It's interesting for sure.
So what are you guys doing to make it, the FBO industry business is very competitive. You probably have one or two other competitors on the field. How do you make it not a race to the bottom, and who can, just sell fuel at the cheapest price?
So we're at an airport, Opa-locka, Miami, that has, an identity that's grown through time. Certainly the other FBOs on the field are larger chains. And the good and the bad of that is the larger chains are what people are used to. You can't avoid them. Signature Flight Support, Atlantic, they have, over 200 and over 60 respective locations. So it's our job to know their format and kind of mimic the format, but be it flexible where the client needs, because it's something that they're used to. They're used to seeing this format. They're used to knowing how the accounting works. They're used to seeing how it's built. So you don't want to go too far from what is standard, but you also want to find where the deficiencies are and build your program around that. And I think we've done a good job of that. Certainly relationships always come into play. I've mentioned that earlier. This is as big as the industry gets, and as much as software and technology that you put into it, there still is a trigger person. There still is a relationship there that needs to grow, and there needs to be a trust there. But my big thing is analytics. I love dissecting every number that's possible, particularly the ones that people haven't been paying attention to for a certain amount of time, and really diving into the numbers. The yin and yang of it all is the relationships and the analytics. So for me, that's the fun part. A lot of times for the answers, I look at outside of aviation. I love sports analytics. I love obviously everything that Amazon's done and some of these logistic companies, and you realize that nothing happens by accident, whether it's a pricing structure, whether it's an occupancy, whether it's an offering, everything has value. And if the value is all priced and offered correctly and executed in a timely manner, certainly time has value as well. You can find the sweet spot, whether it's anything from a minuscule fee to a fuel price to communication with the client. So there really is no one trick, but I think you need to be open-minded to look at everything and find where you want to pour your time into to get the biggest results.
Who's becoming more, I can't think of too many more businesses that are, that are as relationship driven as y'all's. And you think about, chief pilot or pilot, pilot in command, or the owner of the aircraft. How are you keeping the relationships with all of those people alive? And obviously you've got your own tenants, but then you've got transient airplanes coming through as well. And how are you getting, how do you go about getting the chief pilot of that aircraft to say, hey, we're going to go stop at, Fountainbleu, and convince that to the owner that that's a right decision, or vice versa? How do you communicate to the owner and you get the pilot to make that decision?
Yeah, I would say, even though I love the analytics, first and foremost, if you have a good company and you're doing the right thing from a service standpoint and you're doing the right thing from a pricing standpoint, word of mouth certainly is still something in our industry or any industry that has a tremendous amount of value, whether it's through newer avenues of technology, meaning people posting things and, all in, all to the benefit of your company. Obviously, certainly if something's going wrong, you don't want them to post that either, but word of mouth will always have a tremendous amount of value. But I think it's more importantly with balancing these relationships, it's that the industry continues to grow and to know the channels that are effective. We've recently switched to being able to text our crew members and text, dispatch and give them that offering, because even though email and phone call and all of these things are still available, you don't want to ostracize somebody who says, okay, I text for everything. Why can't I text to you? Or I go just right to the website. I'm able to click right through it and get what I need. I don't have to talk to anybody. So I think it's important that when we say balance the relationship, it's balance the relationship through the avenue of communication that's preferred for them. Sometimes people just want to talk to one person and that's it. Great. Sometimes people don't want to talk to anybody. That's great too, as long as they're getting what they need. But if their experience is positive, I think that's a tremendous thing. And I a lot of times use myself as my own guinea pig. I find that obviously everybody likes Amazon. If you're able to click through Amazon and get everything you need and you didn't talk to anybody on the phone and that's what you like, okay, perfect. Then happy customer. So just very, very interesting.
Just keep it, hey, look, it's like everything in the world, the better the more relationships you can have, the better the business. How about Miami? Is obviously big airport authority, you find that working with the city is in Opa-locka has been a very positive type experience. The relationships there are, are those ones that are easy to keep moving forward, or?
Yeah, I had to jump into the learning curve of Miami, coming from obviously the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, and a lot of the airports within proximity of Teterboro all falling under the same, collective umbrella there. But in Miami, I grew to understand the difference between Broward and Miami-Dade, and even though they're very close to each other, certainly there are different bodies there that are trying to grow their entity. So Miami-Dade has certainly been behind the growth of Opa-locka, particularly since it's been so aggressive over the past decade. This is an airport that goes all the way back to the Cold War. Amelia Earhart flew out of there. So it's an airport that has a lot of history, but from a corporate standpoint, it went from the airport that used to be the graveyard where planes went to die to pretty much a top 3-4 airport in the country from a corporate standpoint. So it's exciting to see the growth. It's exciting to be a part of the growth. But yeah, we definitely have the support of the companies around us and Miami in general. So it's very cool.
Is Fountainbleu, are you guys investing in other airports? You happy with your property there? Are you expanding? Or are you just really focusing on what you got and doing everything you can to make it better?
I would say ownership is, again, visionaries when it comes to opportunities. There was an opportunity in Opa-locka every bit of 10 years ago. Bobby Courtney, our VP, came on about 7 years ago, grew it to, I came on board, then collectively we've been tackling everything together. But the Sofa family is, again, visionaries where if it's an opportunity, not necessarily aviation, but hospitality in South Florida, they'll be interested. If it happens to be aviation, it happens to be aviation. But I think collectively, it's just opportunities in general that can play off of each other. So having Opa-locka Airport and FBO at Opa-locka helps stimulate the Fountainbleu hotel relationships and the JW Marriott and the golf courses. So, always adding pieces that can continue to work off of each other. So hopefully other aviation pieces, but no guarantees.
There you go. How many movements a year will you guys handle?
The airport or Fountainbleu?
Fountainbleu.
Fountainbleu. So the airport, thankfully we're doing well. We share market share with Signature and Atlantic, but thankfully we are the leaders there. So I know that's uncommon for an independent to lead the market share at an airport, but that's where we've grown to. And movements wise, we're doing it's peak season right now, so numbers could be up to 50 arrivals, 50 departures on busy days, 60, 70 departures. And it doesn't really do a ton of peaks and valleys in the season. Certainly summer is slower, but South American stuff picks up. So I would say every bit of 100 a day.
That's a pretty good amount of traffic.
Yeah, it's very busy, and it's a healthy split of tenant and transient. The airport was probably heavy dose of tenant, and then transient only during peak seasons. But the transient stuff has certainly gone throughout the whole year. And it's not, I guess, the way I see it through my eyes is if you're there and you're seeing it every day, you realize that the transient business is not people that are going on vacation. Certainly you still have that, but it looks a lot like that New York traffic that I used to see of people coming in on a Monday, leaving on a Wednesday, and they didn't come with their kids, or they're coming in, they're having business meetings, they're seeing headquarters in Miami. So it's got that corporate feel to it without losing that weekend vacation traffic either.
Gotcha. Hey, let's take 5 minutes. Let's take 5 more minutes to talk about one thing. I hear about the democratization of business aviation.
Okay.
A lot of people trying to make it, open to more people, or cheaper per seat. From you see the customers coming through your doors every day. Is that real? is that a real trend, or is it just something that's going to be challenging?
I love it. I think it's absolutely a real trend. I think it's incredible that route that people are going. Number one, being an advocate for general aviation, it adds a layer that didn't exist. It didn't shuffle from a different bucket or a different column. You're essentially taking your first class commercial airliner passengers and bringing them over to aviation, and perhaps maybe it stimulates growth in their company where they can jump on a light jet or a midsize. But shuttles and sell by seat, I've seen it work. Certainly, people are familiar with JetSmarter and some of these other companies that, depending on which side of the fence you were on, you could say it worked or didn't work, but it can work and it will continue to grow. Blade is one that runs one route from Opelika to White Plains. Mm-hmm. And they run it during when there's saturation points. And if you have the saturation, it does work. So as long as you're working with points that have that saturation level, you can continue to offer those products. But I think I enjoy the battle between first class and private and first class and private jets. I think it's interesting. And I also think it's interesting what Emirates and some of these other people, other companies that are out there do to combat that, because at some point, somebody might want a first class seat because you get a desk, a bed, a shower, and that might be better than one seat on a Gulfstream. So it's this constant battle going back and forth. But in the end, it grows general aviation, and puts more fuel on planes, and puts more planes in the air, and allows people to be more efficient. So I'm fully on board with it, big advocate for it, and I think it will continue to grow.
Yeah, no, look, I like the concept. I like what Blade is doing in Miami now with a couple helicopters they're putting down there. Yep. From Miami to Key West and Miami to other points in South Florida. And I think that there's a real business case for that to be made there.
I think, it's more important, instead of trying to cover the whole map, just cover the points that are showing that it could support it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got you. So how do people get a hold of you?
My cell phone is out there to everybody in the world, I guess. It's the same number I've had since high school, and all through Teterboro, and on my email, and I pride myself on being 24/7. So I know that's the name of the game. You build your life around that. But like I said, I have fun doing what I'm doing, working with the team that we're working with. And, it's never, the phone never rings, and I'm never saying, I'm not going to pick that up. It's usually somebody that I can help. I pride myself on helping people and finding a solution, even if I don't directly have the answer. So, no, I'm an open book for sure.
And the company website is fbaviation.com, right?
Correct.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Anthony, for coming on. I loved having you today.
Yeah, excellent. I look forward to staying in touch with you as well.
Let's come back and do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks.